Welcome, guys. It's a history burst about Native Americans and how they lived their lives. Very different from the lives of white American settlers. Way of life is very different. They are a group who thrive on the Great Plains, that great American desert from a previous burst, and they have adapted to that harsh environment in a way that means they thrive as a culture. Because it's a harsh environment where the land is difficult to farm, they become nomadic. They move with the buffalo, as it shows you in that orange box at the bottom. They travel following the herd throughout the year, and they hunt. They don't hunt for sport, they hunt for what they need, for necessities. They are respectful. They use all parts of the buffalo. There is no waste. The heart itself is not eaten. The heart of the buffalo is buried back into the ground, left on the plains in a way to give life back into the plains environment. The horse, of course, becomes as equally as important as the buffalo because it enables them to hunt the herds more efficiently, quickly. They're able to transport their tribe, their bands, using the horse with a travois that carries their belongings, their teepees, as well as used obviously for hunting. And horses become a bit of a status symbol, a symbol of their wealth within the band, within the tribes. And the organisation of the nations themselves, as it says in the blue box, you have a variety of notorious, if you will, significant tribes: Apache, Cheyenne, the Lakota Sioux. There's others, the Arapaho, Comanche, who have their own distinct cultures. They're not identical, nor are they absolutely totally different. There is overlapping, but there is intertribal differences that can cause tension, that can cause differences in fighting, but they share core beliefs about respect for nature, core beliefs about religious aspects, and core beliefs about that almost equality of status between men and women, and the respect for elders, and the raising of children as a community. It really, the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child" kind of is synonymous with the Indians, where everybody participates in child rearing, even if their child is not of their flesh. When it comes to the homes, usually you should be recognising the teepee, distinctive in its triangular shape, conical when you look at it, a wide base, deliberately so, that is packed down very quickly when the buffalo move and put onto the travois, as it described in your pink box. And you can pause the video to have a deeper read of that, should you need to, about the travois. The teepee itself, it's significant shelter made from buffalo hide, pyramid in shape, that conical shape, to allow to withstand strong winds on the plains, which we've said the Indians adapted really cleverly to the environments, and the style and design of the teepee is no accident. It's wider at the base to provide. The flaps themselves can be opened in the summer to let in cooling breezes, and can be closed down in the winter when it's cold for heating, because there is a bit of a chimney hole, if you will, at the top, which lets the smoke out from the fires. So they are warm in winter, cool in summer, and suited to these extreme weathers. And then they are pitched in a circular way to keep in mind the religious beliefs of circles, life, born, live, die, and you often found these arranged in a circular pattern because of that. They do have lodges, in certain parts of the plains. Most of the work is done by women. Remember, the men are hunters, so the women skin the buffalo, keep the home, cook food, but there's respect in that role. It's not a subservient role. It's for the good of the band, for the good of the tribe. Everybody has a part to play to ensure that the tribe succeeds, that the band survives. Beliefs, we've already mentioned that there is commonality in beliefs. It's the land is the heart of it. It's really what clashes with the white American beliefs of manifest destiny, which is you own the land, you do something with it, you make it productive, you make profit from it. It's the direct opposite for the Indians. It's respect. They are caretakers of the land for future generations. You can't own it. You use and give thanks for the bit that you do use, but you preserve and protect where possible. The land is a living thing. Everything has life in it. And the land sustains their lives. So for them to disturb and disrupt the land and desecrate it would be desecrating the life-giving that it does for them. The spirit world, they believe in the great spirit, like Antanka. During puberty, boys would attend a ceremony to find their spirit animal and get named from it. Sitting Bull is one famous one from his vision, who gets the name Sitting Bull because that's what they see, and spirits are very important to their world. At the end of this topic, the ghost dance is where they believe that the spirits of dead Indians could be raised to fight the white oppression in the dying days of the resistance against white. So spirits are really important, and the Great Spirit obviously is the most important. So, they believe that life is in everything, even in rocks and stones and pebbles, as well as your plants and your water and your animals. Circles, we've mentioned, are really important. Particularly the Sioux Nations, the cycle of life is birth through to death, respectful of circles, the sun and the moon in nature. The pattern of the seasons is cyclical, so again, there's that respect for the seasons. Tribal councils, the leaders, when they met, they would sit in a circle, so there's no one person in charge, everybody's equal and balanced. And then you've got some ceremonies down there at the bottom in blue. I mentioned the ghost dance, but others, buffalo dance, war dance, the sun dance, which are all to celebrate various milestones, whether it be victory in war, before going out on a raid or before going out on a hunt. So, they have their cultures, very different from white cultures, but their own distinct cultures that nonetheless that celebrate life and celebrate the milestones in life. Mentioned this idea where, the cultures and the religious beliefs just are diametrically opposite from the white Americans. We know that there are increasing numbers crossing the plains and interacting with the Indians on their way to Oregon and California. And when Americans see Indian way of life for the first time, it's often viewed with great negativity. It's very different, it's very primitive, it's very savage by American white standards. It's not Christian. They don't have an organized religion in the sense that they go to church. There's nothing written down. There's no religious book that the Indians follow. And so that raises suspicions in the early days with those early settlers, and does contradict the manifest destiny that the land is to be used and filled up and made productive, whereas the Indians were seen as quite wasteful because they didn't farm the land, they didn't use the land to its full potential. They just used enough of what they needed in order to survive. And when white Americans saw scalp dances and war dances for the first time, it would be quite shocking and quite frightening. So you can perhaps understand why distinct groups do not immediately become warm and firm friends on first interaction. When it came to fighting, both hunting but into tribal fighting, Indians are very skilled. The bands that make up the tribes would look very strange to white Americans, but there is leadership, there is organisation. You have bands, which are the smallest unit in a tribe, a few extended families led by chiefs of council, then tribes led by chiefs, who would be advised by tribal elders. So the community spirit is really important for everybody to survive, as I've mentioned before. You know, the chiefs are deeply respected, but they're not dictators. You know, they are open to being disobeyed and being challenged, but in a way. Decisions are collaborative. It's very much an equal opportunity, so to speak. Everybody has a say. Everybody can discuss what's going on. A chief is chosen, so almost like elected, as we do today in our democracy, chosen for his skill as a warrior, his experience on the battlefield, if you will. And you might have multiple chiefs in a tribe, depending upon their skills, you know, so one for their skill in war, spirituality, that type of thing. And you know, they don't really need laws, because if people don't work together on the plains, then you know, it's a bit like the tribe and the band are only as strong as their weakest link. So everybody needs to work together in order to survive. The white Americans believe that they should make laws for the good of everyone. You know, we have laws today that we follow that's for the good of everyone, and this is very different to what the Plains Indians subscribed to with their way of life. And white settlers couldn't really understand why chiefs couldn't make their people do what they were told to do. It was kind of like something totally new for them to kind of get their heads around, the white Americans. They don't understand this idea of having more than one chief and everybody having to agree. You know, they come from a society which we live in today, where at some point somebody has the final say. Mentioned roles within the tribe. So here we've got breakdown. We know that men are hunters, women, although they can't be chief, they're very important. They look after the families, maintain the teepee. Buffalo, greatly respected, and had special roles in some of their ceremonies. Children are cherished. They are precious beings. No formal schooling. Prepared for adult life within the tribe. So boys raised to become warriors, women raised to become those powerful female role models within the tribe. They're expected to behave, looking after family, particularly the elderly. And the elder themselves, you know, if you don't look after the elderly in your tribe or band, you are seen as doing something terrible. It was a really, really awful thing to do, viewed with disparaging. People took great pride in looking after the elderly. It's really important that they're looked after and revered. Now, the initial stirrings of this discord between white Americans and natives, because the natives are, you know, over time more and more viewed by the white Americans as in the way of progress. They're in the way of manifest destiny. They're in the way of the people travelling west. And so, you know, the American government have always been kind of a bit unsure of what to do, because the Indians are there. They're not going anywhere because they rely on the plains buffalo to sustain their lifestyle. And so, you know, with the increased numbers of white Americans settling west in the 1840s and onwards, it makes this kind of discomfort and suspicion between the two groups ever more so exaggerated. And so the permanent Indian frontier is kind of a plan that the government have, where they introduce the Indian Removal Act, which forces Indians living east of the Mississippi to move west. We've got the Indian Trade and Intercourse Act, which again, kind of government believing that because the plains are worthless, we give the Indians one big reservation in which to live on, and then the settlers will just skirt round and through and just kind of trip on their merry way to Oregon and California, and leave the Indians with this kind of worthless land, which the American government at the time didn't really want. So you know, they're offered money, the Indians, to do so. And the, you know, the protection of the settlers on the way through. So forts are built, and you start to see this kind of scaling of the plains physicality of who can go where and why and how. And then the migration west, you know, the land beyond the permanent Indian frontier, which you can see on the map, seen as worthless. And so Manifest Destiny doesn't really want it yet in that idea. The American government is kind of already starting to break treaties because when gold is discovered, 1848 western frontier, it makes problems with because you have more and more settlers travelling through the plains, this great reservation, in order to get to the gold, which rubs obviously the feathers of the Indians, no pun intended, because they're travelling lands that the whites shouldn't be, according to the earlier agreements. So we see a change in the relationship between whites and Plains Indians who are living not next door to each other, but they're having to live alongside each other with this, kind of ships that pass, if you will, with whites travelling across the plains to settle west. And as you can see, I won't read the spider diagram. You can see where there is pockets of potential tension, from how they live, quite savagely, in dirty teepees, if you will, to their attitudes toward the land, caretakers versus manifest destiny, family life. They don't like polygamy, which many Indians practice, but it was to look after widows. Often men would marry a widow and have more than one wife. If a warrior had fallen in battle or a hunt, then the widow would be looked after and her children by marrying another tribal member who may already have a wife. Obviously, the government, how they run the tribes and bands is very different and a source of tension. Their religious beliefs and how they go about fighting wars is almost completely opposite in every single aspect of life. And furthermore, we see a deepening of the prejudices between the two groups. The huge numbers that travel across the plains only make matters worse between the two groups, not better. The sudden floods of people, 1849 and 50, attracted by gold, just exacerbates it further. They just assume that Indians are going to fight because they look like they're going to fight. The Indian warriors are scary looking, they're very different and they look fierce fighters, and so it's the assumption that they're going to not if they will attack the whites, but when, and so that initial hostility only deepens. With more and more settlers, you have an increased demand for food supplies, whether it be buffalo or land or water or wood for burning. So all of this is causing an escalation of tension quite early on in the 1840s and 50s.